Va bene, dicevo soltanto che ringraziamo tutti i presenti.
I would like to thank all the participants and those who participate, Italian and foreigners, and especially all the students of the IPEAH school who were the first to ask for participation in this day of commemoration. The title was suggested by our dear friend Vittorio Pavoncello, Memory, a Right Use of the Nations, Let's Save It to Save. This journey starts in 1945, as you all know. The January 27th is a symbolic date. It is the day when the extermination camp of Auschwitz was freed. Every year in this occasion, as the second article of this law, through ceremonies and common occasions, we remember this fact, especially in schools of every grade and level. We remember what happened to the Jew people and the politician and military deported in Italian, so to preserve for the future of Italy the memory of this terrible and dark period of this, our country and of Europe, in order for those kind of events not to happen anymore. Now, 21 years have passed since this law was approved, and this occasion was really wanted by Furio Colombo, who was at the moment a member of the House of the Representatives. The Memorial Day was then recognized worldwide with a resolution of the United Nations with the resolution 60/7, in order not to forget Shoah, the extermination and the persecution of the Jew people and of the military and politicians deported in the Nazi camps. I would like to give the speech to Alena Krempaská. I am sorry for the pronunciation now and later on for all the other nouns. Alena is the director of the Human Rights Project. She will present the IPEAH project, and the word goes to Alena.
Good morning to everybody. I welcome you today at this wonderful occasion. My name is Alena Krempaská. I'm a program director of Human Rights Institute in Slovakia. I'm very happy we can have this conference today at such an occasion to give tribute to remembrance of the Shoah. This conference is a part of a bigger project called Informal Participatory Education Against Anti-Semitism and Holocaust. This way, we will try in the couple of years to come to talk about, test, and come up with new ways of Holocaust remembrance, because as Angela also explained, we believe it is extremely important to remember this event. We will be testing new ways online with competitions and with some participatory tools for schools and students. The project was financed by European Commission, by Directorate General Migration and Home Affairs, and I thank them for the support this way. And This is it from my side. I hope you'll have a good day today, that we will hear very interesting speakers. We will talk about the remembrance. We will talk about new ways of how to educate and remember the Holocaust. And I also welcome here other speakers that will be gradually introduced when their time comes. I give the floor back to Angela, and I welcome also all the participants, attendees, and schools today that are here with us.
Grazie, Alena.
Thank you, Alena. Well, I would like to speak very briefly considering our cultural and experiential cultural background about anti-Semitism and racism, starting from a quote starting from the ever meaningful quote about Auschwitz. It was an answer about by William Clark Tyler. Tell me, where was God at Auschwitz? The answer is, and where was man? Racism is a term indicating the certainty not only that races exist, but that one race is gifted by some special qualities for what it has to be preserved as much as pure as possible, defending it from mixing with others. Racism is connected with the idea that there is a superior and an inferior race. The first destined to command and the other one to submission. The ideology of race finds its roots in the popular racism, which is the very ancient tendency of man to judge inferior to himself those who are different from him. It is a group of prejudices and unreasonable reasonments pushing to refuse those who can be different for their physical aspects, social position, culture, religious faith, sex, different provenience, and at least since 2000 years, Jews are a victim of racism. The Jewish people, with its very ancient origins, has always been object of persecutions and offense. Anti-Semitism replaced the religious anti-Jew opinions during Second World War. Leaders of the Nazi Party started the ethnic extermination in the territories of Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, murdering and erasing the supposed enemy races and the genocide of European Jews and the destruction of the ruling class of Slavic countries. The product of the Nazi Party was the extermination of a race, a real war, a race war. The first race war, as Vittorio Pavoncello says, and I agree with this concept. The concept of race is so instrumental that to consider the Jews as a race has no scientific base. Our true truth is that prescinding from the real conditions, racism and anti-Semitism can be used in any political context to obtain their own purposes. Racisms are, as a matter of fact, scapegoat for frustrations, fears, and violence. We don't need to go very far to find the truth. Unfortunately, they are very near to us. We just have to have a look at what happened in Italy because of a right-hand party, very aggressive, demonstrated to be able to put in action, even in a democratic country as ours. I don't want to go very far in time. I don't want to speak about the horrible racial laws about them. We agreed about them in the fascist past, but also about the laws, the Salvini laws against immigrants, those who are still in our Mediterranean Sea, which was once a sea of cultural exchanges, and now it is a battlefield without visible weapons, allowing that children, women, and men drown because they cannot be helped, because they cannot be helped by us and by all Europe. A cemetery without tombs, without names, in the depths of our sea of Mare Nostrum. Are we all guilty? Yes, partly we are. If we still go on shutting our eyes and pretending that it's not our matter, or that it matters only to Italy or Greece, for example. I conclude with a quote from Liliana Segre: "Indifference is guiltier than violence itself. The moral apathy of those who turn their head. It happens even today, considering racism and the other horrors of the world. The memory is a vaccine against indifference." I finished. I stop here. And now I would like to leave the word. I would like to leave I would like to ask Peter to pass the video with Furio Colombo. I introduce him. Furio Colombo is a journalist, a writer, a foreigner correspondent for Italian television, a member of the House of Representatives, and here it is his video. Thank you. For me, this is a very important occasion, as the Memorial Day is the result of 4 years of work in Parliament, which was not willing to it for reasons shared by left-hand and right-hand parties which were not prone to have such a day because of the existing danger of ritualizing. I oppose to saying that ritualization is always possible when there is a day commemorating events of our homeland. On the other hand, it is always better than void, because void leaves room for everything that can come in and occupy it. The kind of occupation of the void of memory is this, in this particular case, is denial, and denial is a sort of germ, a sort of disease, which behaves as some diseases do, in the sense that it changes during the treatment, that it becomes something else. It shows itself with a new innocence and with arguments which are totally different from those it was born from. Scholars, and to all those who deal professionally with the past, denial raises an issue. Denial is not an opinion, it is a fact. And here, there's the big difference from a wrong dispute, which occurred in many universities, and to which the first reaction was that you cannot disagree with the different opinions of the colleagues, and you cannot prevent the progressive revision of historical facts as long as new historical facts become available. You maybe remember that the reaction to denial was very mild, especially in American universities, much milder than the political and public reaction. It is the opinion of an historian who renewed, on the basis of his studies, his perception and his reconstruction of the phenomenon, and at least we have to leave him free to express it. But that freedom was not the change or renewal of an opinion, but it is the displacement of an historical fact, which was the fight of the free world against fascism and Nazism, and implying all the values of fascism and Nazism. Denial displaces facts. If you deny the racial laws and you tell them as a form of government that was not very prone to personal freedom, you are telling me another story. Even the legal review of some laws judged denial as illegal, which I consider a very right decision, as it means to lie on history, to hoax the new generations who study history. Therefore, we must pay attention to the curve, the way in which this germ could extraordinarily change, so to become at least as long as a strong left-hand party existed in our country, for example, to become anti-Israelism as one of the many features of the Italian left hand, much more than of the right hand. Or better, it is a feature of a secret right hand, which prepares a lot but tells a little, such as Casa Pound or such as those legions which keep ready in the halls of life of Rome, also in other Italian towns, and which we don't know if and when and how can be more active. At the moment, they are where they should be. They are present when they need to prevent the ANCI resistance march. They are present to gather with left-hand groups when they have to dispute the flag of the Jewish brigade when it takes part to that march. It happened in Milan twice in 2 years, but they do not comment. At present, while we speak and celebrate this Memorial Day, and we consider what it was and how great, not banal, evil was, how strong it was, how fragile and weak everything we can call good was, because the silence, the absence of Europe in that time, such as it is happening now in defense of immigrants, in defense of those 30, 40 children dying every night and that no government intends to be in charge of. Today, just as then, the weakness and fragility of good, since we talk about evil, is impressive and gives us bad news about the capacity to resist to some thrusts, even when those thrusts may be ready to collapse. But what I want to say here today is that memory is now, not then. It is today that we remember and that we practice our right and our duty to remember. This inevitability to remember, not because we remain still there in the past, as some say, about some sentimental narratives, but because I'm here today and I know what the world I live in is like. And I know that without this memory in the world I live in, the world would be incredibly poorer and incredibly emptier and would sound out of time, false and falsified as they want us to believe very often. The other very important point it is to say that not all the effort to produce so many products of fiction and representation about the past effectively represents a deep change of feelings. Memory is not a circle. It belongs to the sentimental world, the idea that memory is a circle. And you get back to your loved one, to the beautiful moments of your life, to your childhood, to the famous granny's apple pie. It has a circular path. It is not. It is a thread. It is a straight line. It is a thread that we pull since then, and that it comes with us, and it is us. Not only us, those who want to remember, but also my fascist colleagues who wanted to vote for something for Trieste in that moment, when instead, then for the law about Memorial Day. For them too, that is the thread, and they are at the end of this thread, day after day, of that straight thread that goes on, and that is the same. We call it memory with a sort of approximative suggestion of psychology, referring it to the past, but in fact memory is a most present thing. We are speaking about forgiveness as a public and collective event between historical and social parts, which found themselves as counterparts during historical events. I hope there will be someone to remember, because this is the other important point in the history of forgiveness. Because even in individual relationship, forgiveness requires to share values. I can forgive, and moreover, the human inclination to forgive exists, and it is somehow naturally an inner status in many of us. It demands to be performed inside a frame of shared values. And that's the reason why, when I was at the House of Representatives in 1996, at the settlement of Luciano Violante as president of the Assembly of the House of Representatives, I found it as an offense if Violante, in his speech, talked to the right hand, which at the moment was strongly fascist. There had not been the evolution due to Gianfranco Fini, who visited Jerusalem, and the events that, when he was a powerful Italian politician, had a strong meaning, showing he had understood what had happened. So to pretend that we are two parties, and at a certain point we have to stop playing the fascists and the anti-fascists. Let's shake hands because we are one country. We are one country if values are shared. If fascism existed, and it was what it was, and you meet someone who is passionately fascist and claims, as Casa found in Rome today, accepted by some political parts, it is present in public events. If he claims his participation to what fascism and Nazism were, there cannot be, even before forgiveness, no kind of equally based relationship, even before we can shake hands. There cannot be a debate. We must exit the TV studio if they are on TV. It is not a matter of forgiving, because you cannot forgive when values are not shared. Less than if there's a religious background, it is very difficult to turn backwards, to forgive something terrible which happened in the past, as if someone could think to forgive Auschwitz and Birkenau. Never trust power when it forgives, because it is an act of power. Forgiveness is possible only between equally based parts, at the same level in experience, in life, in power. It is very true that the after-war period was characterized by the two parts, winners and defeated. But the defeated had the privilege and possibility to re-enter the community of all the others, only if, but also with the very easy passport, very easy to obtain, to recognize that they were the wrong and defeated part. This tells us that terrible moment we talk about in the Memorial Day wants us to know, wants to feed our memory, which is already scared by the awareness of what really happened, telling us that it can still happen, that it can happen again. But now the protagonists is us. Good. We are respecting the schedule. I would like to pass the word to Vittorio Pavoncello, writer, director, and founder of ECAD. The title of his intervention is Memory as Peace. Later, we will see the trailer of his film, Rome, A Short Eternity. Thank you to all the organizers. Thank you to everybody. I found immediately very important the organization of this day, because it comes from young people who ask themselves what is happening. Again, or we could say what never stopped to be, changing in its ways. I would like to speak about peace as memory, and memory as peace, because memory is not an acquired data. It is something we have to conquer, something beyond, something. Recently, at the archive of the Quirinal, I compared peace, memory to a promised land. When you get to memory, it's the moment you can settle peace. But this doesn't mean that peace eliminates, erases conflicts. The first ones to acknowledge this lack of peace are those who wanted war. And just like Angela was recalling before, I would define not Second World War, the one who brought to Shoah and to racism. I would define it the first racial war in the World War, because the motivations were racial. Concerning this speech about race and the change of perspective, here we have all the strength of recalling the memory and to be memory, because the trap, and it is very actual. That's why the Memorial Day is accused to be institutional and celebrative. Through this Memorial Day, we make history. History is important for memory, but we don't have to make Memorial Day become a history day when those facts are repeated and those who know more expose them more, to make them weigh more, to stress it more. Memory is something else. Memory is a cultural data we transmit. That's why it is important. Today's meeting is important. And it is important that it is performed in the frame of a general speech on racism. Basically, racism is the erasing of the other because I decided. I, referring to who has the power, is the context of power who has to be turned upside down, so the other can be in the same condition where others can be racially inferior. This creates a sort of supremacy inferiority debate. We could say that racism always existed. It is inner in the human being because it allows to establish differences, but it is not so. A human being is not tendentially racist. He becomes this way in a cultural and power state. The most evident form of racism, and we think a little about this, is the genre racism between man and woman. Because why man establishes what a woman should be in a situation of not dealing with the power, those who are the victims of racism adapt to that condition in order to live, or in some cases to survive. This situation is based on, needs a change in perspective to bring it back to contemporarity. Today, we are speaking about anti-Semitism. As far as I'm concerned, anti-Semitism stopped in Auschwitz. Angela was distinguishing between anti-Judaism with a religious base, and there's the anti-Semitism, which was born with the Dreyfus case, starting from there and getting straight to Auschwitz. Today we have to change the terms. Today we should speak about anti-Israelitism. So we have anti-Israelis and Israelites. In these strange situations, we tend to hit the ones to create big consequences to the others. In fact, this racism needs to change itself continuously because it is so unnatural that it needs to modify itself continuously to live and explode inside human societies. That's why I was saying that memory helps, as long as it is culture, also to read the past from the right distance in order to observe in a different way what happened. Also with a certain consideration, because maybe during the events you have to act instinctively, also to face dangerous situations. I conclude before passing to the film. Knowing I had to take part to this event, I've been thinking about a biblical episode, the one of Lot's wife. Sodom was destroyed. She doesn't have to turn back. She turns back and changes into a salt statue. Sometimes the danger in memory through history is that looking backwards instead of going forward can bring to a still situation, a situation of stillness, because even if we recall what happened because we don't want it to happen again, we take with us what fascism and Nazism where we store them. And so it is important when we recall memory, we have to act so that memory is not a vehicle for those messages that we don't want anymore. I just would like to add a couple of words about the film you're going to watch, the trailer of the film. The film is about the fascist and Nazist occupation of Rome, brought to contemporarity, brought to the studio of a psychologist, analyzing memory and analyzing our own identity. In the film, the psychologist becomes involved in this process, and she will also have to deal with a negationist, with a denying person. So it brings to the attention also the problem of denial. I leave you to the trailer, and thank you.
Grazie Vittorio.
Thank you, Vittorio.
Mentre aspettiamo che mandino il trailer,
I would like to quote one of your sentences. The importance of memory is also in celebrating memory as an action in its importance. Memory is everywhere. Everything we live is made of memory, and also things are made of memories. Human beings are made of memory differently from other forms of life. He elaborates memory, preserves it, and uses it. But memory, even if rich and well-oriented, doesn't guarantee that some things will not happen again. To be empty of memory brings to emptiness. Thank you. Thank you for the passage you read.
La storia delle parole che fecero la sua vita. Alcune parole sono inventate, altre invece sono vere, quelle che erano intorno a lui. L'occupazione nazista, perché se l'esito della guerra fosse stato diverso io non sarei qui a raccontarla. In fondo siamo tutti dei sopravvissuti, noi che raccontiamo la storia.
Con teutonica determinazione avessero continuato nel loro intento, oggi chi sarebbe il responsabile per la storia? Senza un'autorità di riferimento fu naturale rivolgersi e guardare a quella che era stata per tanti secoli un'autorità su Roma, il Vaticano. Il Vaticano divenne l'unico punto di riferimento.
Roma si riempie di sfollati, provenienti dai paesi vicini, in fuga dai bombardamenti, ma non era facile accoglierli.
I nazisti, parole di sterminio, di terrore, di violenza e di morte.
Credo che il nazismo e il fascismo devono essere estirpati dalla faccia della terra attraverso l'educazione, attraverso l'insegnamento, attraverso gli esempi che noi possiamo portar loro, non già per spirito di vendetta o di rivalsa, ma soltanto come indicazione.
Li consideriamo come un gruppo separato, ma non isolato, dei nostri peggiori nemici.
Forse l'astuto maggiore nazista pensava di poter risolvere la questione della sua scomparsa, di farsi finalmente consegnare il simbolo dell'ebraismo distrutto.
Io sono il numero 335216. Il numero mi è apparso sul braccio. Io non so né perché né come. Le carte d'identità. Io posso capire un singolo psicotico, una setta. Ma un popolo intero no, io non lo capisco. Diventano corali, partecipate, vive e ancora impressionanti.
Naturalmente Hitler abbandonò la pratica religiosa prestissimo.
E devo accendere subito la luce, così che possa scomparire tutto davanti ai miei occhi. Perché le leggi razziali discriminarono senza motivo alcuno una parte degli italiani?
Vedevano i rom, gli omosessuali, gli ebrei, i disabili, come una sottospecie primitiva di ominide. Nella scala evolutiva.
Simile a una bamba!
Comandante Kappler si devono la creazione del carcere di Via Tasso, il rastrellamento del Quadraro, che portò alla deportazione nei lager di circa 900 uomini.
Bene, grazie.
Grazie a te, Vittorio, è veramente molto bello.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Will it be possible to see all the movie? Yes, of course. I officially proclaim it, I say it to the schools. The film can be seen in its whole after the conference.
Bene, allora andremo avanti con
I would like to go on with another video message by Gadi Luzzato, an historian, director of the Foundation Contemporary Jewish Center of Documentation in Milan.
In questi 10 minuti,
in his 10 minutes message, he will speak to recall the title of our conference, Memory, Our Right Use of the Nations, Save It to Save. The video can start.
Buongiorno, sono
Good morning. I'm Gadi Luzzato Voghera, director of the Foundation Center of Contemporary Jewish Documentation in Milan, an institution which has been operating for more than 60 years with the Jewish Italian communities, both at a national and international level, in connection with similar institutions worldwide, in order to collect documentation about the persecution of the Jews in Italy and Europe during the Second World War, and about their participation to the anti-fascism and anti-racism, anti-Nazi resistance. I thank OSS Italy for inviting me here today to this event on 27th of January 2021, the Memorial Day, to reason about the concept of memory, about the concept of right use of the nations, and the role that this ideal character can assume to educate new generations. The institution of the Righteous of the Nations was created by Yad Vashem Museum, instituted in Israel in the mid-50s, commemorate the persecution of Jews in Europe. In that occasion, a garden was created, a garden of the righteous ones, to dedicate trees and plants, an element of life, to the memory of those people who, even though not Jew, put themselves into danger during the persecutions to save, at their very own risk, personally, and at the risk of their families too, to help, to hide Jews, to help the Jews to escape from this fatal persecution. Therefore, it is an institution with a great ethical value, which was able to identify during the years dozens of thousands of people, we can say heroes of our times, who, in front of the alternative between, in front of the choice between saying yes or no to a persecution they were witnessing, to choose to say chose to say no, and decided to operate personally to save and help those who were in troubles. From the perspective of reflection on the meaning of these people with great ethical value during the Memorial Day, we should reason in many ways. It is not such a linear path as it may seem by my introduction words. There are many matters to consider. For example, historical evidence takes us to consider people who behaved as righteous of the nations in certain situations and who had non-ethical behaviors in other situations. In other words, it is evident that the complexity of human nature does not allow any of us to be superheroes, always and utterly righteous, with a right and spotless behavior. But the human being has such a complexity, such a complicated inner nature, and every time he faces difficult situations, or as the historian Todorov would have said, faces the extreme, each one of us has the possibility to behave in a more or less right way, but of course you have to find yourself in such conditions. Underline that some people behaved in a heroic way from a pedagogical point of view is quite important. It has a great value. School students, youths who are shown people such as in Italy, the famous, renowned case Giorgio Krempaská, a man who ideologically took sides with the oppressors. He had been a fascist, he had volunteered in Spain during the Spanish Civil War, who had been on what today we would call the wrong side, but in another situation, a few years later, in Hungary, in front of the deportation and oppression of Budapest Jews, tortured by the Filo-Nazi Hungarian soldiers and by the Nazi invaders who deported hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews. In front of this situation, he found the strength and will to act in order to save, as history says, more than 5,000 Jews who would have certainly died in the huge extermination machine created by the Nazis. It's therefore an important instrument, useful in order to educate the new generations, an instrument that takes us back to the present, that takes us all, and especially young people, to the responsibility to behave in a right way in front of the emergencies of everyday life, playing their role and being able to say yes or no according to the ethical evaluation of the commands that different laws, various laws impose in our life. As an historian, I must say that unfortunately the righteous person in the tragedy characterizing the extermination of the Jews in Europe, and even though many dozens of thousands of righteous ones were found, was a minor character. Unfortunately, the unrighteous were many, many more. Those who chose to conform, to welcome willingly the actions, transforming them from human beings, simple and normal human beings, to slaughterers, persecutors of helpless civilians. When we think about the righteous of the nations, we must also consider the fact that the unrighteous ones are many more. I therefore thank you and wish you success in your work. I hope these considerations can help to lead the new generations to interesting paths of self-education for a peaceful future for all Europe. A very important concept, the concept expressed by Gadi Luzzato, who is an historian. Since September 2016, he is the director of the contemporary Jewish documentation in Milan. In case you didn't hear it perfectly, you just had to ask, especially for the schools, you can ask to re-listen to it. Now I would like to give the word to Marcello Kapowski, writer. He will witness his he will give his voice to his experience.
Perfetto, scusatemi, ma questa modalità di partecipazione, essendo io un troglodita,
Hello, I'm sorry, I'm not very expert in this technological way of taking part to this event. We are all in the same situation. Please. First of all, good morning to everybody. I am very glad to share with you my little experiences. I'm a writer, but I am especially and most of all son of a survivor, a Polish Jew who at the age of 14 was taken to the abyss of the ghetto, who saw his father dying, and from the ghetto he was transferred, as the Nazis said, to Auschwitz, where his mother was immediately killed in the gas chamber, and his brother died shortly before freedom. I wrote 2 books about Shoah, books that don't want to be another description of the horror of the lagers. Those books want to ask questions and underline the fact that Shoah didn't finish with those events, but was projected in the future like a nuclear explosion, just spreading in the atmosphere mortal radiations. And in the following decades, it still asks for a tribute in victims. It is not easy to write books about the Shoah because you always have the feeling that your book will be taken with a sort of sufferance and people seeing it in front of it, seeing the book in the libraries, people will think there was no need for another one. Because on Shoah, everything was written, everything was said. I must say that this perception, the perception that Shoah is already a saturated matter. It's true that about Shoah, hundreds of books have been written. Some of them are really masterpieces, both for their literary nature, but also for their witnessing nature. But on Shoah, we keep writing, and what is currently written on Shoah doesn't always give us new perspectives on it, but these new books are certainly sentimental and witnessing experiences. I am frequently invited in schools to speak to students, and during these meetings, I often ask students, young people, what may seem a banal question. What is for them the meaning of the Memorial Day? This may seem a simple and banal question, but in many of them, it creates a sort of uncomfortability. And some that don't know how to answer, so they tend to go to common answers, to give common answers that we have to avoid the past from repeating itself. That's the most common answer I get. I understand them. This banal question is, in fact, a very difficult question who would give troubles to many people. As far as I am concerned, I am in troubles when I have to consider it, especially in the ritual and sometimes musical way it is dealt with. It is as if January 27th, we are compelled to wear our best participation, feelings of participation that we take off at the end of the day and we store in our closets because they can be ready to be taken out in the next year. This way of commemorating Shoah tends to make it to make it far away from us. January 27th is exclusively lived in a sentimental way, and there is scarce space for a deep reflection, a strict and accurate consideration about the involvement, public and personal involvement. I believe that students should be made in condition to understand that Shoah was not an inexplicable shadowing of humanity and civilization, but it was the inevitable conclusion of a long historic process, taking to the affirmation of ideologies, philosophies, identities, we can call them in many ways, which didn't have at the center of their conception the idea of the dignity of human being, the inalienability of human rights. Young people must understand that every historical process can take two very different ends, and they depend only on our choices. It's us who can choose what the end will be. I would like to conclude quoting Johann Baptist Mestre, a Catholic theologist who inspired the new political theology from which the many freedom theologies were born. In his life and theory, Shoah had a great importance. Mestre wrote that the hugeness of Auschwitz was having reduced the limit of metaphysic prudery. So what a man can think he can do to another man was completely reduced. There is only one way to make it evident, linking Auschwitz to the crisis of humanity, of solidarity, to the continuous speech hates, indifference, to giving to ourself a priority in spite of the others. The others are basically considered enemies, dangers. This very tiny thread leading Auschwitz to our days is memory. Memory intended not as the attempt to make the past live again, or the attempt to oppose to the caducity feeling. But memory is something we have to digest, so that the events of the past will become a burden of the history. He defines a society where past will become a reach of history. Paradoxically, we won't have the need to remember again. I thank you. Thank you, Marcello. To remain in our schedule, I would give the word to Nitzan Menagem. I'm sorry for my pronunciation, President of the Youth Movement.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you very much. I will speak in English. So thank you for the translators also. I would like to thank you for the invitation and the very interesting conference. We have a short time together, so I will go right at it. I will say a few words about myself and about my work and share some of my perspectives and ideas. I have a presentation. I hope technically this will work. Can you see it? Is it okay? Yeah? Can someone give me feedback? Because I don't see you anymore. Yeah.
It works fine. Thank you.
Good. Okay. So first of all, saying a few words about myself. My name is Nitzan Menagem. I am a non-formal critical international educator, originally from Israel. I've lived long in Jerusalem.
Bravo.
Is there a problem? Okay. I will continue. I think it's okay. Okay. Yeah. So since 2008, I am working in Israeli-German exchange programs, and since 2015, I live in Berlin. This is my academic background, and I will talk about a couple of the organizations I've been involved with right now. So first of all, Hashomer Hatzair Germany. I am the chairperson of this organization since last year. Hashomer Hatzair is a secular Jewish youth movement that was founded in 1913 in Galicia. By 1939, Hashomer Hatzair had 70,000 members worldwide. It was reestablished in Germany in 2012, 72 years after it was prohibited during the Second World War and the Holocaust. Nowadays, it is mainly active in Berlin with kids and youth. But our new board is now working on spreading ideas of progressive Jewish education in Germany generally. It stands for socialist values of equality, democracy, peace, children's rights, workers' rights, solidarity, and internationalism, and is a part of the world movement of Hashomer Hatzair. I invite you to check out our website. In a couple of weeks, we will have a new website, so remember it, or contact us per email if you wish. I would also like to introduce a new initiative called Rosbot. It's a sub-project of Hashomer Hatzair Germany. It is inspired by Rosa Robota. She has a very interesting life story, although it was a very short life. She was a Jewish resistance fighter during the Holocaust, who was murdered in Auschwitz at the age of 23. She was also a member of Hashomer Hatzair in Poland. Rosbot is a platform for critical educators, which I will talk about in a second, what it means. And it is supporting initiatives and projects from political educators to increase the work against the politics of fear and right-wing extremism. Here's also ways to contact us. Okay, so a little bit of things that I notice in my work about the lives of Jews. So first of all, there's an issue of a misconception of Jews. So what is actually a Jew? I think that it's due to Holocaust studies, media, and stereotypes. For example, not all Jews are of European descendants. The idea of existing Arab Jews rather than assuming that Jews are enemies of Arabs. The example on the left is quite recent from German media on the vaccination process in Israel. So it's a positive thing that Israel is on the media about. But if you've ever been to Israel, this is not how Israelis look. There is a minority of ultra-Orthodox Jews that look this way, but it is mainly a stereotype of what is Israel, what are the Jews that are living in Israel. There was some relation to this topic, but there's also this anti-Semitism that is hidden in some of the anti-Israel critique or criticism towards the government of the state of Israel, which I observed that has a lot to do with a lack of reflection on curiosity following the Holocaust. So there is an unresolved curiosity. And finally, the complexity of Jewish life in the diaspora in current times. So the rise of right-wing extremism is essentially also rising anti-Semitism. There were several examples in recent times. I will not go inside, but the recent ones are the conspiracy theories around Corona, but also regular attacks. A lot of them are not reported. So about education after Auschwitz, I would like to read a quote from Theodor Adorno about critical education. It's not the easiest, but it's also possible to find this text in other languages, I'm sure also Italian. So the quote says, "One must come to know the mechanism that render people capable of such deeds, must reveal these mechanisms to them and strive by awakening a general awareness of those mechanisms to prevent people from becoming so again. Only those who unreflectingly vented their hate and aggression upon them are guilty. One must labor against this lack of reflection, must dissuade people from striking outward without reflecting upon themselves. The only education that has any sense at all is an education toward critical self-reflection. When I speak of education after Auschwitz, then I mean two areas. First, children's education, especially in early childhood, then general enlightenment that provides an intellectual, cultural, and social climate in which a recurrence would no longer be possible. A climate, therefore, in which the motives that led to the horror would become relatively conscious." This was written in 1966. If anyone is interested in reading something today, then I would definitely recommend to read this. Okay, so there's the question of never again. Is it possible to happen again? I can't say for sure, but it's a question we all have to ask ourselves. Okay, I will be a bit quicker because I see that the time is running out. So about Holocaust education today, so how do we deal with anti-Semitism in 2021? There's a very famous poem that is read often in Holocaust Memorial Days in Israel. It's called "Each Person Has a Name." by Zelda. So the idea to remember the lives that began and could have been, the loss of more than a number of culture and intellect and love, so the persons, and also using, using new tools to remember and connect. So for example, there was an Instagram called Eva Stories, which was trying to involve youth in the story of Eva. So teaching also the complexity of the Jewish identity, so culture and history, and not as a religion only. No, sorry. Yeah, in Israel specifically, it is also a part of a national identity. And also the majority of Jews are actually secular Jewish people. So it's not rebellion, it's rather a stream. Then also the educating to reflect on anti-Semitism, so who benefits from it. It is also similar to racism. And especially educating to listen and act. So the crucial action, not to be a bystander, also when it's an easy situation. So for example, comments or jokes. Okay, this is my last slide is about guilt and responsibility. So very shortly, I use it as a tool and as a route to reflection. I noticed that this is a repeating theme in discussion with youth and adults in Germany. So it's this different alienation over this is not my fault, I wasn't born then, or it was a long time ago, it was the Germans, and so on. So the idea is to use critical self-reflection on one's role in making society better, in making this not happen again. So reflecting identities and privileges from an empowering place and not from the guilt perspective, but rather as responsibility, as someone who can stop this from happening again. As part of it, I would also recommend trainings for bystanders, so to empower the actual action. That's it. Thank you for your time. I was a bit over time. I hope this is okay. You are very welcome to contact me if you want to discuss this stuff further. And again, thank you for the invitation.
Grazie, molto interessante.
Thank you very much, very interesting. We are surely going to ask for more. I would like to give the word to Stéphanie Lecesne, coordinator of CHEI.
Non è in linea?
She's not online.
Yes, she's not yet here. So Alena asked me to take the word because we have a little bit of a program issue, but no worries. So let me introduce myself. I'm Bálint Josa from United, the director of this pan-European anti-racist network that exists since 1992. And one of our key campaigns was the commemoration of 9th of November, which is a different, very important day in commemorating the Holocaust, which is the day of the Kristallnacht, when in 1938, the German cities and ordinary citizens with the hate incitement of the Nazi party started to trash Jewish-led businesses in German cities. And this is for some also called like kind of the actual physical part of the starting of the Holocaust. So that's why we commemorated 9th of November in the United campaigns. And one of the campaign that we led in 2016 is what also we mentioned in the previous presentations about superheroes, because what United always does is linking the history of the Holocaust with today's events, and also the far-right political parties, including naming them on running for the European Parliament in the EP campaign, or connecting it to day-to-day events of anti-Semitism in Europe. And the superhero campaign is also tried to be encouraging ordinary citizens that even in the time of huge despair, the Holocaust, or any programs or fight against minorities, we have the power to stand up and look for these type of superheroes, ordinary people who said no to incitement, who were brave enough to stand up. And of course, this is not expected from the ordinary citizen, but at the same time, if we don't do something and we stay silent, then our conscience might be the victim of Holocaust. And as Nitzan mentioned, the so-called bystander motivation and psyche, it is very important that these bystanders don't stay silent. So I would be very happy to continue with non-formal education on the matter, because we are at the turning point when actually the survivors of the Holocaust are less and less available to be witnesses of history. So it will be our task and our project to actually commemorate and also remind that the word never again is not just a slogan, but actually a continuous effort. And this effort, United will be one of the key partners for anyone who would like to join us, or even we can join you. And by that, I will give over the floor to Stephanie from SEJI. And I'm very happy that they came, because I find SEJI a very innovative and very great organization that does the job that we need desperately in today's times. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. I have some problem with my video, meaning that my voice and the image are not synchronized at all. So I will stay with my picture if it's okay for you. So first of all, I would like, in the name of SEJI, a Jewish contribution to Inclusive Europe, thank the organizer of this conference. Thank you so much. I promise I will be brief, because it's already 12 and you must be hungry. As a starting point, as a French woman and historian by training, I will use the word Shoah instead of Holocaust, if it's okay with you. So I work for SEJI since 10 years now as a training coordinator. A very brief presentation of SEJI, and I will put in the link of our website in the chat box, is a Belgian NGO established in 1991, standing for individuals and organizations of all religions, culture, and backgrounds to promote a diverse and inclusive Europe that we need so much. SEJI trains teachers, social workers, authority, youth on different topics such as unconscious bias, anti-Semitism, homophobia, Afrophobia, and Islamophobia. In order to train all these people, SEJI used interactive and participative methods. And the SEJI approach is holistic. At the same time, we recognize the specificity of each discrimination mentioned above. I am giving training course for now almost more than 20 years now to an audience of teachers. And if I step back and look at the work that we did, I noticed that it's becoming increasingly difficult to tackle the subject because teachers, at least the teachers that I train in France and in Belgium, are less and less equipped to deal with the resistance that can sometimes come from some students. What we do during our training is, what we do during our training is that we emphasize the uniqueness of the Shoah, the uniqueness of its deliberate and systemic implementation in order to build bridges toward the education rooted in the human rights approach. For example, we recognize other genocides by giving the opportunity to address other traumatic stories, not to diminish the Shoah, but instead to create necessary empathy for new generation and understanding that Shoah is above all universal. So my presentation is quite short, and I don't know if it's possible in the format of the conference to have some question answered, or if it's not, I can give some anecdote if you want, or some
Stephanie, the Zoom format is complicated, so please give us the anecdotes instead this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So, for example, as I told you, I train quite a lot of teachers and youth workers, and sometimes, even me with the youth also that we train, I feel a big resistance for some of them to tackle the history of Shoah, saying all the time, "Oh yes, but dude, you the Jew, it's all the time about you, it's all the time about your story, and nothing about our stories." So what we start to do, we say, okay, so let's open the floor and please share with us our story. And we noticed that by doing this, the resistance were less strong than before. And also, we noticed that Shoah education is very important, but not in the way that me, as a French student, received it. Because at that time, when the teacher used to start a lesson on Shoah education, and I have some of them later on that admitted, they consider that their lesson was good when some of their students were crying. And so, in order to get away from this, emotional impact, of course, the Shoah is something that is unique and horrible, but we try to bridge, to build bridges instead of putting. Oh, sorry. Yeah, as you notice, I'm not English speakers by birth. This is very clear. And by doing this, it's we cut the how's it in English? La concurrence victimaire, the victim concurrence. It's clear or it's not clear for you?
Or competition is also used.
Yeah, exactly. The competition of victims. I don't know if it's the good word in English. So and CEGI, it's true that CEGI never tackle all of Shoah education, but we try to fill the gap, because if you ask now to a non-Jewish European, you ask him you tell in Jewish, they will say the Shoah and Israel. And between these two words, there is a huge gap that is filled, with stereotypes, prejudice, and a lot of fantasy. And Seji helped to fill this gap with other contemporary story. I don't know if I was super clear. Hello?
Yes, we're all here. We can hear you. No worry.
Okay. So I don't know, because now it's yeah, I'm almost about my the time that I was on. So I don't know if there is question on the chat box, or I can also give my email address if people want to ask me some further question.
Yes, sure. Please write down the address, and if somebody's interested, maybe Angela can later on also distribute the contact list for some further queries, or for if the school has questions. Thank you, Stephanie. I would yield the floor then to Angela.
Grazie.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Stephanie. We will pass your contacts to the students listening to us. There are two high schools, Liceo in Rome, Croce, and Piaget in Rome. I would also like to remind that the translation is simultaneous. You only have to click on the small world icon. I would like to give the word to Thomas Buckler. I hope I didn't
Brilliant. Technology works. It's not a given these days. So first of all, thank you all for having me today in this panel. It's a great honor for me to speak to this, by the way, amazingly big crowd. These days, usually online conferences are not as well attended as this one. So I think that's an amazing achievement on its own. So I thought to just introduce myself very briefly. My name is Tamás Buchler. I'm originally Hungarian, but now I'm based in Brussels as the coordinator of the knowhow project, which is an abbreviation for Networks Overcoming Anti-Semitism. It's a European Commission funded project that aims to fight and combat anti-Semitism in a systemic, holistic way all over Europe. But before I tell a little more about the project itself, I really want to give a bit of a context to what Stephanie, who is my colleague in Brussels, said about our trainings. So really just a couple of words about maybe my personal background that actually serves as a context for what I'm about to say. So I'm a grandchild of 4 Holocaust survivors, and I was born in the 80s in communist Hungary, where, well, it was before the democratic transition, so there was no really space to discuss Jewish identity. My parents, both Jewish, they both grew up in an environment and in families where they had to hide their Jewish identity. They had literally no connection with the Jewish community, and as most of the Jews in their generation had no understanding of what Judaism is about, not about the religion, not about the heritage, not about the traditions. So when I was born, I already I was one of the first people in my generation who was very much benefited from the fact that the times were changing, and all of a sudden it was okay to talk about Judaism, but there was really not much to talk about because my parents didn't know anything about Judaism themselves. So what I was left with is really only the stories of my grandparents, and my grandparents only wanted to talk about the Holocaust, their survivor story. It's a very well-known phenomena among survivors that they were never comfortable to tell their stories to their children, but once they were hitting a certain age, once they retired and once they were aging, they felt very comfortable to share their stories with their grandchildren. And me being the youngest grandchild for all of my 4 grandparents, they thought that I'm just the perfect audience to tell their stories. So I grew up from a very, very young age, from the age of 5, 6, always listening about the experiences of my grandparents. And for a young child, and I say young, I mean young, like I was, I think 6, 7 when I first started to hear about their experiences. So for a young child to hear all the time about Holocaust, about the ghetto, about the lager, the camps, Auschwitz, Birkenau, like it was always discussed. It was so heavily present in my life as a child that I think it heavily impacted how I today think about the Holocaust and Holocaust remembrance today. And I think there is clearly what they usually call a transgenerational trauma, and I think it definitely impacted, me as a human being. But that's more the personal side. I want to talk more about the professional side of the story. So when I was growing up in this atmosphere, I think I became somewhat immune about Holocaust and anti-Semitism. I felt that it's just so heavy that I don't want to deal with anymore. So I wanted to learn more about what's out there and what Judaism is about. If they hated us so much, what might be the reason, if there is a reason at all? So I think I didn't want to hear about the Holocaust for many, many, many years. And then I think when I was in my 20s, I understood that actually we can discuss this topic and it's legitimate to discuss this topic even further, but we have to be clear about our purpose, because young Jews in my generation, we just simply can't build our Jewish identity only on combating anti-Semitism and only on the memories of the Holocaust. It's not a healthy Jewish identity, and it's not a Jewish identity that I want to pass on to my children. So we had to think, and I think we are still figuring out. What I'm telling you now is not a best practice, it's a journey. I think what we are still very much trying to figure out is that what's the purpose of remembrance? How we can remember the best, if there is a best way. There are many ways to remember. And I think that what we are trying to do also at CEGI, and what I'm trying to do also in my private life, is to understand what that purpose might look like. And I think that when I say purpose, I mean a positive purpose. I think we can be clear on that, or I'm at least want to be clear on that this purpose cannot be about revenge or making other people guilty or making, somehow feeling only sad and bad about this. If you want to honor the memories of the victims of my family, the way to do that for me is to give it a positive purpose. And this positive purpose can be many, many, many things. It can be understanding Jewish heritage. It can be understanding our traditions, Jewish spirituality, Jewish values, Jewish contributions to Europe and to the European societies today and over history. These are all ways to remember. And I think that what I like the most about Jewish traditions is that there is a very big emphasis on learning. And as a matter of fact, I'm sure many of you know that if someone dies, especially in the Orthodox Jewish community, one of the ways to honor the dead is to learn, is to look at Jewish texts and to learn. And I think that this is exactly how we look at remembrance at CEGI and also at the knowhow project, is that honoring the victims cannot be only about telling the stories of the Holocaust. It has to be future oriented. It has to serve a certain higher positive purpose, at least for me. And this can really manifest in many, many things. I mentioned learning, but learning is not one thing. It can be volunteering. It can be helping our own local Jewish community, strengthening our own community, as volunteers attending Jewish programs, exhibitions, reading Jewish books about Judaism, watching movies about about Jewish history and Jewish life. So there are many ways really to serve that purpose. But I think that this is not only true about the Jewish community itself. Our project, the knowhow project, which you can learn definitely more online. I will post the website. I know I'm running out of time, so I'm trying to wrap it up quickly. So I think that one of the ways how we want to kind of bring Jewish remembrance to the public is through creating positive Jewish memories for people who are living in Europe today. And this can be done through cultural events. The knowhow project is actually creating many Jewish festivals and exhibitions over the summer during the European Days of Jewish Culture. We are creating social media materials and campaigns to show profiles of organizations and people who are fighting for a better Europe, a Europe which is more diverse, more inclusive, people who are fighting poverty, people who are fighting racism, homophobia, anti-Gypsyism. There are so many fronts in Europe today when Jews can really contribute and are contributing. And I think that spreading the word about those stories is how we also honor the memory of the victims. So that was just a very short introduction to what we do at knowhow, and I'm more than happy to share with you our website. There are many ways how you can also connect with us and how you can work with us and volunteer and get involved in how we are trying to create a systemic change in Europe. You can have all that information on our website, and just as Stephanie said, I'm also more than happy to connect with you on a personal level. I will share my email. And I'm looking forward to hear from you. And again, I know that the platform doesn't really allow us for a very interactive conversation, and we also don't really have the time. But on a one-on-one level, I'm more than happy to have those conversations. So thank you everyone for having us here today, and it was a pleasure, and hope to hear from you soon. Thank you. Grazie.
Grazie davvero infinite.
Thank you very much, Thomas. It's been very interesting, very touching. I really thank you on behalf of everybody else. We will certainly have the possibility, the way to get in touch with you. I would finally give the word to the president of SOS Racism for the conclusions. And at the end, we will see all together again to say goodbye and to give the appointment to the future appointments, future occasions we are going to deal with. So now the word to Alberto Sera, President of SOS Racism.
Come dire, un incontro davvero emozionante.
It's really wonderful, this conference, especially for the presence of young people. Sometimes I think that memory concerns only old people, but today I have proof that we are in good hands. Today, during our conference, but also through TV programs, radio programs. Today we are going to listen to many ideas and concepts, so it can be maybe difficult to orientate. Yesterday on the Italian television, the news didn't mention the fact that today it was going to be Memorial Day. They only said that the consultancy for the new government in Italy are going to be delayed. You know that in Italy we have this serious government crisis. So there was just this delay because of the Memorial Day, as if it was an accident, something occurring in the usual development of the institutional day. I will try to summarize briefly what I've heard, as I have this great honor to conclude this meeting. I share with Marcello what he said. I am a digital analphabet, but he suggested me that I am a troglodyte from the digital point of view. I hope we can soon have a conference in presence about these matters. This morning, I heard on the radio a quote from a book by Elena Lowenthal and an interview where she said something very touching. Memory is not an act of tribute to the Jews, to the Jewish people, but it is feeling those histories as our personal ones. Only for the fact of being European, we have to feel that story as our own. Certainly, to feel that story and that history means to share those values. Memory is sharing values. It's not only saying today in Rome we say let's love each other or let's love those ones. That's not an act of saying I'm sorry or I feel moved. But it's indeed sharing the values of that story. The other quote that Angela said before by Liliana Segre, and which is very present, referring to our historical time, is that memory is the vaccine against indifference and hate. And it is a very powerful vaccine that can effectively solve the problems described by Pavoncello. So that is the fact that anti-Semitism needs to change, to transform, to just like the virus of COVID-19, we have the different forms from Brazil, from UK. So those different versions of anti-Semitism are present, and memory is needed to tackle them, to vaccine against these different versions of anti-Semitism. Of course, today we had an example of this through the participation of young people who work on memory every day of their life in their work. And memory is an event which amplifies life. It is bravery. As Marcello said, it's not a case in a museum or something still in the past. It is something, it is an active event. Memory is a source of knowledge. The problem, the issue of the survivors' stories, tales, have been treated. We must be very careful, because some say that when the emotional component of the survivors' tales will finish, it will be your duty to this memory, which will not be direct and live through those witnessings, it will be your duty to prevent this memory from being manipulated from political or artistic manipulations. For example, in films and movies, sometimes we have a distorted telling of what the actual facts of the period, of that period were. I really appreciated the trailer of Pavoncello's film. I went several times to the ghetto in Rome to have guided tours, and once our guide told us that her grandmother every day used to stop in front of the wall to just recalling the steps of the boots of Nazi and fascist soldiers during the nights of the deportation of the Jews of Rome. In that part of the trailer where we saw and heard the steps of the Nazis, recalled to me this tale. So the attention to the pop culture, especially for young people, yes, we have to save with memory a non-manipulated culture. Finally, memory is for young people, is for the future. So I conclude with a sentence, with a quote from a writer, Nathan Endelen, saying, to look at the past as a way to give shape to our future dreams for the future, a future filled with peace and hope. I thank you all. I am very, very happy of these 2 hours I spent with you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to...
No, io non mi ha disattivato il video.
Ah, no, io non lo posso attivare, Peter forse sì.
I wish to say goodbye.
Ok, vorrei Vorrei stare ancora con voi.
I would like to be with you a bit more. It was so pleasant. It really, these 2 hours flew away so quickly. And it was so wonderful.
Vorrei lasciarvi con una frase.
I would like to leave you with this sentence by Primo Levi about Auschwitz. I've been thinking about it in this period of pandemic. He says, Auschwitz is outside of us, but it is around us. The disease was treated, but the fear is still crawling. So my wish is that this happens never again, and that memory will always be so active and lively in our lives, in our everyday lives. Thank you everybody.